Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Judy Cavan Brown. I serve as a director for AAUW California and am fortunate to also be the chair for the Fund Committee. I'm pleased to welcome you all to AAUW California's first virtual Fund Luncheon. This is my first Fund Luncheon. It would be nice to be gathering in person in a room full of smiling faces, but the COVID-19 pandemic calls for safety measures that disallow such events. Fortunately, we have access to technology that makes online events such as this webinar possible. And since we have unlimited space, we have 214 people registered for today's event. I don't know how many we've got registered for next time, but there will be different people speaking at each event. So please feel free to register for the October 24th as well and enjoy that event as well as this one. We are even more blessed with our communication team, without whom this event would likely be total chaos. Unfortunately, you won't be able to look around and see everyone's smiling faces, but you will be able to see each of the presenters as they give their presentation. Although I am new to the Fund Committee this year, the majority of the committee are quite experienced and probably familiar to you. They are Janice Cook of Victor Valley, Sharon Westaffer of Long Beach and Stockton, Liz Bathgate of Hayward Castro Valley, Judy Horan of California Online, and Charmin Goring of Sacramento. If you wish to schedule a fellow to speak at an event for your branch, Jan will be happy to help you with that. And Judy and Charmin are our AAUW Legacy Circle coordinators for California. You will be meeting Judy later today. I do not need to tell you how important the work of AAUW is, especially in today's world, a time where we are seeing so much of the progress already achieved, not only for women, but culturally, ethnically, environmentally, and the list goes on, being placed in danger of regress. The work of AAUW is more important now than ever. AAUW Fund is necessary to drive everything we do. So please be diligent with raising money for that. Today, we celebrate some of that work. I am excited to share that in 2020-2021, AAUW Fund raised $3.5 million and awarded funds to over 200 fellows and grantees. 24 of those are in California. Of those, one is from Ecuador and another from Jamaica. We will be hearing from 8 of these ladies today. At this time, please welcome our exceptional AAUW California President for 2020-2022 and past Fund Chair, Diane Owens.
Hello, everybody. I'm really happy to be here today, and thank you, Judy, for the wonderful introduction. As most of you know, or some of you know, I'm the California State President this year, but for the past 2 years, I have been the AAUW Fund Chair, and that is the best job I have ever had, I think. It is so much fun, and I regret that we can't all meet in person this year because it's so much fun to look out over the crowd and see everybody, see how excited they are, and to hear our fellows. So we're going to do a great job in this webinar, and you'll get to hear everybody and you'll learn what they're doing and how excited they are to have received an AAUW fellowship or grant and to be able to do the work that they're going to do. Now, normally at these luncheons, I look out over the crowd. I also look at the list that I have, and I see that there are a lot of past presidents in the audience. Now, today I can't see you. Nobody else can see you either, but we're going to thank you for coming today. And I want to tell you who is here in watching all of the activities today. We have with us past President Joanne Brown, Jane Niemeyer, Gloria Taylor, Kathleen Cha, Donna Lilly, Kathleen Doty, Nora Perry, Sharon Schuster, who is also a past AUW national president, and Chris Winter. We also have with us Sherry Sorokin from the Marin branch, who is on the national board. So welcome everybody, and thank you for coming. And I hope you can hear all the applause that would have happened if we had all been together. I would also like to let you know that we have a lot of our current California directors with us this afternoon. And and the ones that are in the audience are Charmin Gearing, who is our meetings planner. She's had a pretty light job this year because our meetings have all been by Zoom, of course. And we have our secretary, Lynn Batchelor, our public policy director, Kathy Harper, our branch assistance chair, Carol Holzgraf, our CFO, our chief financial officer, Raleigh Wendorf, our tech direct coordinator, Susan DeGretti, our CU chair, Donna Lilly, and of course, Sandy Gabe, who is my assistant and who is the guru of all of these webinars. So anyway, welcome everybody. I'm so glad you could come, and hopefully you'll get to meet everybody that's studying in California. And some of them are studying other places, but they're from California. So that is good too. So with that, I would like to introduce our guest from Washington. She didn't have to fly. She just grabbed her computer and she's with us today. And that is Heather Miller, who is the AUW Advancement Director and the Director of Plan Giving. So welcome, Heather. Last year you were here in person, and I'm sorry you can't be here again in person, but welcome.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Diane. It's so good to be with you. Do you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you to AAUW California and to all of the organizers for inviting me to join you for this wonderful event once again this year. And yes, I am glad I didn't have to fly, but I do miss seeing all of you in person. I am AAUW's Director of Advancement from the National Office, which is formerly known as the Development Office. And I work very closely with our supporters in the area of philanthropy, primarily in major and planned giving. And it's a pleasure to be here with you. I just want to give one more shout out to all of AAUW California. Don't they do a superb job keeping us all connected and informed about the important work AAUW is doing? So I really appreciate that. Well, we're here today to celebrate the work and achievements of some of AAUW's illustrious fellows and grantees. And what a truly brilliant group they are. As we do that, we also remember the history of AAUW fellowships and grants dates back to 1888. That's a 132-year-long history of a continuing commitment to educational opportunities for women. Today, AAUW has $120 million in endowment funds, thanks to the generosity of our members and supporters over the years. This means that we are able to give out $4 million annually to our fellows and grantees. And this amount continues to grow over the years, thanks to it being endowed. But we also know that today, women graduate from college at a higher rate than men and earn even more advanced degrees than men do. And this is why today our important mission work encompasses so much more than just fellowships and grants. We are now laser focused on the strategic plan areas shown here on your screen. And they are removing bias from education, fighting for fair pay and economic equity, which we also call economic security for women, and leadership. Education includes, of course, our Title IX work and the latest STEM work. There's some really exciting STEM work going on, that is science, technology, education, and math, as you know, thanks to, in large part, to a generous bequest from the late Nancy Grace Roman. And you can learn more about that in some of our membership publications and our newsletter, Mission in Action, if you get that usually every month. And economic security, as you know, includes AAUW's crucial work addressing the gender pay gap, women and student debt, the motherhood penalty, women in retirement, and so much more. Plus our award-winning Work Smart Online, along with our signature Start Smart program. California is very active with both of those. In September, I want to point out that new data was released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and as unbelievable as it may seem, we know that the wage gap between women and men has barely budged. Women are still earning 82 cents for every dollar that a man earns, and it's even worse for women of color. Couple that with the fact that women hold nearly 2/3 of the nation's $1.54 trillion in student loan debt, and then add in a pandemic. You can see that our work on economic security has never been more urgent. The third area I want to touch on, of course, is leadership and breaking down the barriers and biases preventing women from attaining the highest leadership roles in nearly every sector. We know, for example, that women remain significantly underrepresented at the highest rungs of government, corporations, in education and finance, law and medicine, I could go on. And AAUW is addressing the leadership gap through innovative programs such as Empower and our National Conference for College Women Student Leaders, affectionately known as NCWSL. Many of you may be asking, will NCWSL take place again in 2021? And it will in one form or another. We did have to postpone NCWSL from 2020 with very little lead time from everything shutting down in March. But we are working very hard to figure out what NCWSL will look like in 2021. And there may be even new opportunities to connect more young college women in that wonderful conference. So yesterday and today, we empower women and girls by providing tools and resources, and we will continue to do so long into the future. Thanks to you, our members and supporters. And there has never been a better time for you to join us. You may have seen that the National Office has launched a series of interactive online webinars with topics ranging from the state of the association to conversations on race, equity, and inclusion, and most recently, the legacy of the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, among many, many others. These virtual programs are all absolutely free, not only for members, you may invite others to join as well, and these are serving to keep us all connected and informed during the pandemic. COVID-19 is shining a spotlight on the inequities in our nation, and this makes us even more committed to our mission of vision and equity for all. There are many ways to engage with us, as I said, the webinars, and especially to engage with us as we are now less than 1 month away from the 2020 election. You can sign up for the 2-Minute Activist program and take action to help combat voter suppression, among many, many other pressing issues of today. You can join the webinars, or you can schedule a viewing of some of our past webinars with your branch or with others and promote a conversation on any of the many topics that were presented. And of course, you can support our organization through your contribution to ensure that this critical work continues long into the future. I will put in the chat, by the way, the link for the convenings, which are all these webinars, and how to find the upcoming ones and the past ones. But finally, if you are an AAUW visionary and you care deeply about the mission of this organization and you would like to keep it going long into the future, consider a gift today to AAUW Greatest Needs, or a gift for the future and join the Legacy Circle. The Legacy Circle is a group of dedicated supporters who are visionaries by promoting a gift in their will or trust or through other planned gifts. And you're going to hear more about that at the end of this program. So stay tuned for that. And with that, I would like to turn it back over to Diane. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Heather, very much, very much. Yeah, we really appreciate you being with us and also being with us next week too. So since you don't have to fly back and forth, huh? You can come back again, right? So thank you, Heather. Now it is my great pleasure to start the introduction of our fellows. And now normally, as most of you know who have attended the luncheons before, we sit with the fellows and we talk with them and we learn some personal things about them that we can tell you when we introduce them, because they'll tell you about their studies, but sometimes they won't tell you some really personal things. But we didn't get to do that today. So I'm going to introduce our first American Fellow. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and she's going to tell you the real stuff about what she's doing and what she's hoping to accomplish. Her name is Jamelia Harris. As I said, she's an American Fellow studying at the University of California in Los Angeles. Her discipline is education, and her degree and specialization is a PhD in Black Girlhood Studies and Education. The name of her project is Hidden Roses, and I'll let her tell you about why that is the name of her project. She's doing research, questioning about anti-Blackness, sexism, power, and space and place, and how they perpetuate the hyper punishment and domination of Black girls that they face in school. She's going to explore the daily experiences of violence on Black girls in a ghettoized high school. Using a Black feminist group storytelling methodology, she examines how these young women self-define Black girlhood and co-construct knowledge. She's a tenure-track faculty researcher, and she aims to expand this research to other schooling contexts. Welcome, Jamelia.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us here today. Again, my name is Jamelia Harris, and today I'm happy to share with you all a bit of my research, which is entitled Hidden Roses. And so I have a presentation which will pop up shortly. But just before I get started, a bit about myself. My name is Jamelia. As I said, I am a PhD candidate at UCLA in the Urban Schooling Department, and first and foremost, a community organizer who has worked with campaigns including Say Her Name. And so a big part of my research really focuses on the ways that Black girls experience state violence and punishment and policing in the school setting. And so we get to get started with the next slide. And so my research examines a really broad phenomenon that we've seen across the nation. Black girls are suspended at rates 5 times higher than white girls. They're more likely to be arrested and subjected to extra legal force as well as police brutality in school spaces. And my orientation to this work began in my high school. The picture at the top left corner, a Black girl was actually violently arrested after dropping birthday cake on the floor. And this was the freshman year that I had begun, when I began high school. And since then, we've seen this happen more recently in the story of Kaya Roll, a 6-year-old Black girl who was arrested for, quote unquote, throwing a temper tantrum in kindergarten. And sort of this broad pattern of Black girls being subjected to disproportionate mistreatment and physical violence in the school setting. Next slide. And so the site of the study that I am currently investigating is what I refer to as Desert Rose High School in Southern California. And it currently has one of the highest suspension rates in the state of California. Black girls are suspended 5 times more often than white girls at a rate of 19.1%, which is nearly 15 times higher than the state suspension rate for all girls. And so really, next slide. So really what my dissertation explores is how do Black girls who experience exclusionary punishments conceptualize the root causes of discipline inequities themselves. And so my work centered on Black girls' engagement in an after-school space that I formalized called the Concrete Rose Project. And we really explore how these girls are using the Concrete Rose Project as a site of epistemic agency to further our understanding of the structural and institutional factors that contribute to their disproportionate punishment. To conceptualize my research, I drew from Patricia Hill Collins' matrix of domination theory. And so recognizing the evolution of racism into colorblind racism, Patricia Hill Collins posits that post-racial social institutions, such as schools, organize Black women and Black girls' oppression across 4 domains of power: the structural, cultural, interpersonal, and disciplinary domains. And so Patricia Hill Collins' theory really served as a guiding framework to explore the ways that school discipline disparities are embedded in the broader fabric of institutionalized racism and sexism, and really examine the ways that this is mediated through policies, ideas, as well as everyday interactions that take place in the school setting. And so my research, again, took place at Desert Rose High School, which is what Elijah Anderson would refer to as an iconic ghetto based on the characteristics of economic and racial segregation, as well as high rates of poverty and concentrated over-policing. Desert Rose High School currently has 98% of students who are identified as socioeconomically disadvantaged. 35% of those students are Black. And I engaged purposive sampling to identify 13 Black girls who had been suspended on 1 or more occasion. And one of the interesting things about this population was that the girls were actually across the academic tracking spectrum. And so I actually had over 5 Black girls who were identified as high performing Black girls who had experienced forms of punishment, including being arrested and subjected to multiple suspensions, as well as extra legal force. And so I'm gonna speed it up a little bit just to make sure that I get through all of my slides, but I just wanted to share some examples of the data that came about from the study. And so one of the interesting things about the study is that it really provides an in-depth exploration of the ways that Black girls, in their own words, conceptualize the role of gendered anti-Black racism and classism in shaping their disparate treatment and discipline rates, with the particular focus on how they are naming oppression as it manifests in the school context. And so Reagan, a 12th grade Black girl, she participated in a session that I called the root cause session, where I had girls analyze discipline data from their high school district and name some of the theories that they had come about of what contributes to Black girls' disproportionate punishment. Reagan first says that the zero tolerance policy is unjust because obviously it only attacks Black girls. Second, she says that no one really takes the time to understand Black girls. Nobody really understands why we're mad or why we're angry. Instead, they assume that we're just being bitter. And third, she says that nowadays, nobody, unless they're really bold, nobody's going to be direct with their racism. Racism has evolved because like it's all going to be undercover, but they still look at us differently because they stereotype us. They're going to do little things like they're not going to say, oh, it's because you're a Black girl. They're going to say, oh, it's because you're disrespecting the teacher. And lastly, she says that it's another form of, suspensions are another form of oppression. And so another interesting quality about the school is that it serves a high concentration of students who are navigating complex structural forces, including the foster care system and homelessness, as well as familial incarceration. And one of the most salient themes that came up was that a lot of the girls felt, because educators were unaware of the structural forces related to race, gender, sexuality, and class that shaped their realities outside of school, they were ill-equipped to address their intersectional needs. And so dishearteningly, many girls that I spoke with believe that their educators were unconcerned about their lives outside of school and missed important opportunities to support their social and emotional needs when they misrecognized their hurt for an attitude problem and opted to punish them instead. And so just some quick implications of what this all means. Perhaps one of the most important findings of this study concerned the power of ideas. When asked to describe their experiences as Black girls at Deseret High, along with their interpretations of the contributing factors to discipline disproportionality, many of the participants immediately shared racist and sexist scripts related to being stereotyped as a ghetto Black girl. Throughout this dissertation, the sentiment suggested that adults in the high school settings maintained racist and sexist stereotypes and deficit thinking about the lives of poor Black girls that were felt and experienced by Black girl students in ways that were harmful and dehumanizing. These findings underscore the imperative need for educators and school leaders to engage in critical self-reflection and conversations about the biases that they internalize about Black girls and the structural forces of anti-Black racism, sexism, and classism within the school that influence these attitudes. I argue that by familiarizing themselves to Black girls' sociocultural identities and contexts, school personnel will reduce the negative stereotypes these students contend with in school and redress the hostility between Black girls and school staff, and ultimately reduce the number of discipline referrals that they receive. Lastly, through the many conversations that I've shared with Black girls, such as the Concrete Rose Project students, I've struggled with the intolerable truth that quite a few girls, too many to be acceptable, are brilliant yet routinely disciplined into taking up less and less space. As a tribute to their brilliance and sacrifice toward this work, I conclude this presentation with a joint letter written by the 13 students of the Concrete Rose Project, which brings to light how these young women demand to be seen and treated in school and society at large. And the students write, "We want teachers and other adults to know that we are more than just ghetto Black girls. You need to know your students and their background and where they come from before judging them. Some of us are loud and love to laugh. Some are shy, some get distracted, but not everyone's the same, and not everyone comes from the same place. So don't assume you know us. There are things in life that can cause Black girls to act in a certain way. We might have an attitude and not express what we're feeling. We are human, and sometimes we do get upset. Be a mentor, leader, or someone to comfort us. Be there when we need you. Ask us why our homework didn't get turned in before you yell at us and assume we have no potential. We try hard in your classes. Even when we don't understand, we always try. Take consideration of what you say because it truly matters and affects us. We are intelligent, beautiful, inspirational, devoted, independent, creative, loving, and too real. We are destined to become doctors, multi-billionaires, entrepreneurs, cosmetologists, artists, and lawyers. We are determined to be greater than what society expects us to be because we are strengthened and empowered by our ancestors, mothers, future children, and ourselves. We are full of purpose and possibilities. We are concrete hidden roses. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamelia. Next up, we have Elizabeth Kopax. Okay, there we go. Beth Kopax. Her study institution is University of California, Riverside. Her degree in specialization is PhD Ethnic Studies. Her project name is Molecular Longing. Adopted Koreans and the Navigation of Absence Through DNA. Best research examines the relationship between popular genetic science, transnational and transracial Korean adoption, and the structures informing kinship, identity, memory, narrative, and loss. Through an analysis of state archives, digital communities, and the emergence of the DNA cousin relationship, she explores the ways in which adult Korean adoptees reckon the unknown and the unknowable in personal and community histories. During the fellowship year, she will focus on dissertation writing.
Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today, even virtually. I want to first express my deep gratitude to the American Association of University Women for their generous support of my dissertation project. Almost every year that I've been in my program, I've had to teach or work more than one job to sustain myself. So this fellowship is a rare and meaningful opportunity to focus full time on my research and writing. And with this support, I'll be able to finish my dissertation within a normative time and walk away from graduate school debt-free. So I really can't express how much this means, especially in our current moment. So again, my name is Beth Kopaz, and I'm a PhD candidate in ethnic studies at UC Riverside. During my time at UCR, I've been deeply guided by intersectional and interdisciplinary frameworks that critically investigate the relationship between race, power, and knowledge. My research examines Korean transnational transracial adoption, kinship, DNA testing, narrative, and loss. So I'll get into a little bit more detail about my project in a moment, but I'd like to start with how I became interested in this topic to begin. So the origins of my project began very simply and very personally. I wanted to understand how it's possible that this moment, which you see on the slide, my physical arrival in the United States, came to prevail over other origin narratives. For most of my life, this has marked the beginning, always a moment of celebration, but never one of loss. Almost as if I was born through the plane I arrived on, delivered by my military escort, Doug, who you see in the middle picture there, who was returning from service in Korea. My biological parents, on the other hand, were invisible, relegated to just a few lines on my adoption paperwork as poor, unmarried, and without the resources to raise a child. For most of my life, I took this to be truth. Yet, as I grew older, I learned that my beginnings were far more complex and were dependent on the purposeful and complete erasure of my biological parents. So I want to emphasize here that this isn't necessarily a criticism or critique of the individual decisions made by my parents, rather an inquiry into the larger structural norms guiding the system of transnational and transracial adoption from Korea. So what histories and narratives are privileged? How do we determine truth from multiple conflicting sources? And how do we allow space for nuance, complexity, and loss within our understanding of Korean adoption? If we can move to the next slide. So I received this photo here of my birth parents in 2012, following a year-long stay in Seoul. Throughout that year, various discoveries led me to a series of new and conflicting truths. Not only were my parents currently married, but they had also been together for 8 years when I was born. I learned that I have 2 older sisters, both who were completely non-existent in my paperwork. And when I met them all in 2014, they told me they believed I had died because they were purposely misled by a Korean doctor. The frustrating part of these absences in my American adoption file is that they were deliberately manufactured to fit the legal requirements of my adoption and were necessary in order to ensure a successful placement with my adoptive family. However, the emotional impact of learning this new knowledge was devastating. I came into graduate school urgently trying to understand these personal contradictions and the system that produced them. I did a master's in Asian American Studies at UCLA, during which I took classes on Asian American history and literature and learned about the social, historical, and political contexts that influenced the movements of Korean children abroad. During this time, I also made a short documentary film for my thesis project. I told the story of an adult Korean adoptee's unsettling discovery through the use of a DNA test, but the woman with whom she had been reunited with for 5 years was not, in fact, her biological mother. This connection, along with countless anecdotes from friends and acquaintances, led me to understand that misinformation, absence, and loss are foundational to the personal histories of most Korean adoptees. These gaps are not mistakes. Rather, they are central components necessary to perpetuate the system. So I put this quote on the slide by sociologist Grace Cho as a way to sort of help frame my project. I seek to enter into the space of absence rather than attempt to fill it. I look at these gaps between conflicting truths and, as Cho puts it, endeavor to understand what can one learn from listening to silence. And if we can move to the next slide. So in order to explore the space of absence, my dissertation incorporates archival research, interviews with adult Korean adoptees, and discursive analysis of popular genetic testing company websites and user technologies. It asks, how do Korean adoptees determine truth from multiple conflicting sources? And how do they create meaning from the unknown and the unknowable? To answer these questions, my research explores a series of layered and complex knowledge projects. For example, formal state archives composed of adoption paperwork and files, popular commercial genetic tests like 23andMe and Ancestry, and the databases that are connected to them, informal relationships between Korean adoptees that emerge in Facebook groups and other collaborative social spaces, and the individual case studies of those who are using these genetic technologies to create new networks and to shape their own narrative. In addition, I look at the development of new kinship relationships that uniquely emerge from these popular genetic tests. By this I mean, I am exploring the relationships between Korean adoptees who become connected as distant third or fifth cousins. It may be easy to question the significance of such distant relationships or to brush them off as inconsequential. However, due to the loss or lack of personal information, such that I had described earlier, and the sometimes fraught process of birth family search, these distant cousin relationships are both transformative and significant. For Korean adoptees who seek them, these cousins seem to address the very real desire to find a biological or genetic family and to forge a close kinship that has often been denied to them. Ultimately, my dissertation examines shifting notions of kinship, race, identity, loss, and belonging as Korean adoptees create meaning from histories of absence and erasure. With my degree, once I receive it, I hope to continue to research and write at the university level and to receive a tenure track appointment at a community college, liberal arts school, or research institution. These professional goals speak to my desire both to diversify the professoriate and to contribute to the inclusion of women and women of color in academic knowledge production. I just wanted to say thank you again for your support that truly helps make this work possible.
Thank you very much, Beth. That was really, really interesting. You know, every time I come to one of these luncheons, I am so impressed, and it makes me so proud to be an AAUW member that can support this kind of work. So thank you both, Jamelia and Beth. And now we have our third American Fellow that I'm going to introduce, and that is Holly Okonkwo. I think I pronounced that right. And she is studying at the Claremont Graduate University in Claremont, California. And her discipline is anthropology and archaeology. She is a postdoctoral student in gender studies, Black feminism, science and technology studies. And her project name is Black Women and the Politics of Computing. So in her research, she's going to explore the material and cultural practices of scientific knowledge production and technology development in the United States and West Africa, with a focus on the politics of race, gender, class, and coloniality. Her current book project explores the experiences of Black women technologists, their technical innovations, and how they navigate and negotiate complex issues of race, gender, community, and marginalization. Her goal is to complete this book project and attain tenure. And we wish you all the best with that. And Holly, take it away.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'd like to start by thanking AAUW for their support of this project and then also their commitment to furthering the progress of women more broadly. I'll start with a brief introduction. I am a cultural and applied anthropologist working at the intersections of feminist science and technology studies, education, and African American studies. I am a postdoctoral fellow in applied gender studies, and I'm also a faculty member in the Department of Anthropology at Purdue University, where I'm currently on leave. In the fall of 2021, I'll be joining the Department of Ethnic Studies and Critical Gender Studies at the University of California in San Diego. I finished my degree in Riverside, so I'm kind of learning to transition my introduction. But anyways, at San Diego, I'll be teaching courses on technology and culture and feminist science studies. Overall, my work investigates how knowledge production and technical practices are culturally constructed, but also conditioned by the politics of racism, sexism, ideas of gender, class, and colonial dynamics. More specifically, I draw on feminist and post-colonial science and technology studies and Black feminist theories to ethnographically explore the lived experiences of Black women in computing in and between the US, Ghana, and in Nigeria. So as an applied anthropologist, I draw on my background in education and training as a user experience researcher to develop equitable organizational systems and inclusive educative technologies and curriculum in the communities I work with. So examples of this work include ongoing collaborations with girls' high schools in Accra, Ghana, to design and develop science labs and spaces. And so you can see in the first image here is taken from a culinary arts lab at Wesley Girls in Accra. The second image is from the African Science Academy, which is an accelerated program for gifted girls from around the continent. And there we hosted a series of science cafes around science, society, and public service. And the third image is most recently from my faculty shadowing a group of study abroad students from Purdue University's African American Studies program. So a central objective of my work is to apply my research and training towards the development of strategies and interventions that directly confront inequality and democratize STEM education for all. Next slide, please. I'll continue. In my current book project entitled Libertary Code, Black Women and the Politics of Computing, I explore the ways African-American women critique dominant narratives about science and technology, their technical and social innovations, and how they negotiate complex issues of racism, social expectations of gender and community to imagine a more liberatory future for themselves. And so I examine cultural constructions of technoscience within Black women's communities, racialization and gendered relationships with technology to provide an example of a feminist remaking of computer science. The research for this project is based on 16 months of ethnographic fieldwork in the Department of Computer Science at Spelman College, located in Atlanta, Georgia. Founded in 1881, Spelman is just one of 2 surviving historically Black colleges for women. At the time, liberal arts education ran counter to attitudes about race and educational philosophies about the purpose of schooling for Black women. In 1987, more than a century after its founding and after nearly a decade of campus protests, the college would finally appoint its first African-American woman president, anthropologist Dr. Janetta Cole. This shift in leadership initiated the college's transition into a National Science Foundation model institution of excellence and an era of leadership for African-American women through STEM education. Now, by 2007, the college's competitive robotics team, the Spellbots, would gain popularity after winning the international robotics competition, the RoboCup, which is essentially a competition between humanoid bots. And so Spelman College would become the first African-American team, the first women's team, the first team from a historically Black women's college, or historically Black college generally, to win the competition. And so the transition of the college from a seminary from newly freed women to a model institution in STEM education make Spelman College the ideal site for this sort of research. Overall, my work promotes the representation and participation of women in science and technology and advocates for the rights of women to develop self-sustaining solutions concerning them for themselves. This gets to the heart of conversations concerning inclusion, equity, and also sustainability. The contemporary discourse is generally approached from a moral standpoint, framed as a threat to economic growth or loss of expertise or loss of expertise, rather than the result of historical and systematic marginalization, stratification, and the exploitation of women. So this history and its ideals and practices contribute to the disparities we see today in participation in STEM education and STEM fields, and also humanity's grand challenges that oftentimes disproportionately impact those very same excluded populations. Approaches to addressing these disparities in computing also tend to focus on gender and race as determining variables with less scrutiny on technology or technical systems as systems of marginalizations or upgrading of privilege and power within our society. By centering the principles and practices of Black women creators and the history of Spelman College and its role in furthering the participation and leadership of Black women, my research offers new directions for the possibility of doing science and technology through a more feminist theoretical framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. That was very interesting. Our next awardee is Maro Youssef. Maro, her institution is University of Texas, Austin, in Austin. Her discipline is sociology. Her degree specialization, PhD in political sociology, and her project name, Women's Movements During Democratic Transitions, the Case of Tunisia. Her research on women's movements seeks to integrate women into the study of democracy and democratization. In her current research, she focuses on religious and secular women's activism during the ongoing democratic transition in Tunisia following the Arab Spring. Prior to pursuing a doctorate, she has served as a diplomat in Washington, D.C., Tunisia, and Turkey. She mentors women interested in politics and hopes to become a congresswoman for California someday. We'll look forward to that. Welcome, Maro.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, everyone, for coming together today, and thank you for AAUW's support of our research. I wanted to give a little bit of a background today about my research and how I came to the project that I'm working on. As Judy mentioned, I'm a former diplomat. I worked at the State Department for 8 years. And during that time, starting in 2012, I started to work on Tunisia and the rest of North Africa. I went to serve at the embassy in 2014 in Tunis at the time where Tunisian women were very involved in writing the new constitution. And that's when I became more inspired to work on a project like this and pursue my PhD. I learned that Tunisian women have the most rights in the region in terms of in the Middle East outside of Israel. And I learned that they were also very involved in the constitution writing process and in the democratic transition. As some of you know, the Arab Spring started in 2010, and it was a wave of revolutions across the Middle East. It started in Tunisia, actually. Before that, people didn't really know where Tunisia was. And unfortunately, most of those countries that experienced uprisings and revolutions are no longer on a democratic track. Tunisia is the only one left. As you know, Syria is experiencing civil war. Libya has also fallen apart, and Egypt is not experiencing democracy anymore. So my research is really about the role of women in Tunisia's democratic transition and how they, from my research, have been able to save the country and keep it on the democratic track. Next slide, please. So I study two organizations. One of the pictures is missing on the right, but that's okay. The organizations, one of them is Islamist, which is a religious organization, and one of them is secular, which is very inspired by French ideals of secularism and separation of church and state. They are secular feminists. The Islamist organization is called Tunisian Women. It was founded in 2011. The organization focuses on women's equality and women's political rights. And they receive and have received funding since 2011 from very reputable organizations in the West, including Congress, USAID, National Endowment for Democracy, even the European Union, and other organizations. Let's, on the other hand, is secular feminist. They were also founded in 2011. They focus on women's political rights, especially what separates them from Tunisia is they focus on inheritance equality, which would separate religion from women's rights. And they do not accept funding from the US. They only accept funding from the EU and other Scandinavian countries. And they don't accept funding from the US because of their position on US foreign policy in regards to Israel and Palestine and the war in Iraq. I picked these two organizations because out of 350 new women's organizations that were created in 2011, these two have stood out and have consistently worked on women's rights and lobbied politicians, both Islamist and secular. And they have been directly involved in providing input on every single piece of gender legislation since. So what is it about them? Why are they special? Well, in my dissertation, I think that the role that foreign donors played was very instrumental and very helpful for these women. They taught them how to be professional advocates and lobbyists. They taught them how to not just protest, but also use the system to engage policymakers, to even write and revise language on draft legislation. So that's one instance that we see where foreign funding has actually really helped empower women. And they have been negotiating with the funders for years. They don't just accept what the funders tell them to work on. It's a two-way street. It's an ongoing conversation about their priorities. And I think that's very empowering. So given my background as someone who worked inside policy, seeing what these women have been able to do with the new resources at their disposal has been very inspiring and empowering. The next part of my project, when I finished the dissertation, will focus on the role of women politicians, also across the political spectrum and the religious spectrum. I want to see how they work directly with activists to make these changes and to make women's rights more advanced and protected during the transition. I have no doubt that these women will continue to hold the state accountable and that they will also keep the country on track towards democracy and democratization. As you know, women's inclusion in political processes is very important to have a representative democracy where people feel heard. So I just want to thank you and say that I am available to discuss this at any time. My background is Arab as well. I'm an Arab American woman. I'm Egyptian. As I say on this slide, I'm an Arab woman. I study Arab women and I advocate for Arab women. So I just wanted to bring some attention to the activism of the courageous women in Tunisia and to show and demystify myth that we have about religious women and non-religious women. They're all working towards women's equality and gender equality. They just have different ways of getting about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara. Very interesting. Thank you very much for spending time with us today. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce one of our international fellows, Rachel Wang. And Rachel is studying at Stanford University. And of course, her citizenship is in China. And she's studying engineering. Her discipline is engineering. She's working on a PhD in polymer, energy, materials, and battery. She received her Bachelor of Science degree in Materials Science and Engineering from the University of California in Berkeley in 2014. She's currently a PhD student in Materials Science and Engineering, and she works with her colleagues on polymeric materials for next generation energy storage devices. And her goal is to become a professor at a research university. And I didn't get a chance to tell Holly this, but I'm really excited to introduce her because Holly, part of the funding for Holly's fellowship is coming from the Diane Owens International Fellowship. So she's only the second fellow I've been able to meet since the fellowship was established. So welcome, Rachel. Take it away.
Thank you for the great introductions. And I also like to thank AAUW for gratefully supporting my PhD study. Today I'm going to go over a bit about my background and some outreach projects that I've been doing. It's been really fun. So, hi everyone, my name is Rachel Zhuojun Huang. As you can tell, I'm international because my Chinese name is pretty much not pronounceable. I gave myself the name Rachel from the TV show Friends, and my Chinese name Zhuojun, it actually means something. It means excellent bamboo skin. So you can imagine how disappointed are my parents when I did not devote my whole life to be consumed by pandas. Instead, I actually work on the cross sections of polymer science and energy storage material. Next slide, please. So many believe that the renewable energy is the future. California is the front runner in terms of renewable energy. By 2035, California set the goal to no longer sell any gasoline car, and the lawmaker want the whole California state to be carbon free by 2045. Those are ambitious goals, and to get there, we have to ask ourselves the questions: do we have the energy storage devices or battery that are ready for that? Nowadays, you can see that conventionally, the battery that we're currently having in Tesla car, we always heard on the news that Tesla car sometimes break down in the middle of the highway without having enough battery to go through the whole long journeys. And just not so long ago, we are engulfed by the news of Samsung phone blow up casually just on the airplane. So to answer that questions, we're not quite there yet. We need battery that can operate safer and also last longer. So we eventually will have an electric car that have the same energy capacity as the current gasoline car. Next slide, please. So what are the batteries that we're currently having? Well, the battery that currently in Tesla car, excuse me, and in our phone are lithium-ion batteries. What exactly is lithium-ion battery? Well, it's called lithium-ion battery because the lithium is kind of lit between layers of graphite. And you may ask me, what exactly is graphite? Well, graphite is nothing fancier, but just pencil lead. So you can imagine that currently in your phone and in other fancy battery that you have is pretty much lithium mixed with pencil lead in them. And the pencil lead doesn't really do anything but stabilize the lithium and adds a lot of weight and space to the battery. To get to a battery that can last longer, and have higher energy density, we have to get rid of the graphite. So taking a battery that is full of lithium metal can be very unstable. Lithium metal itself is very active and is unstable. And my PhD research mostly work on how do I use a layer of polymer coatings to protect the layers of the lithium metal that is in the battery to stabilize the next generation battery. Kind of similar to how you can apply a very stable layer of varnish on any metal projects to protect it from longer usage. So I'm very grateful that AAUW has awarded me this fellowship so I can pursue the grand goal of a carbon neutral futures and working towards that grand goal. Beyond PhD research, I'm always constantly thinking about how to give back to the community. Next slide, thank you. So when the pandemic hit, I was thinking, you know, I cannot go into the lab and do any of the science anymore. How can I help to contribute to the society while I'm at home? Then I started this food science blog called the Big Nano One. And where this food science blog, the goal is to create more educational materials that uses common household items like foods like flour, rice, milk, and olive oil to create an educational demos that everyone is accessible and can do at home and help to narrow the education gap that is being brought on by the new mode of in-home learning. So over the course of pandemic and up till now, we have created many blogs, and this effort has been noted by the Stanford News and several Stanford-based news sources, where we highlighted a few blogs over here, where we explain why the sticky rice is sticky on its own. How can you lift up a whole cup of rice with no glue and just using one chopstick with the magic of friction? How can you make your own milk pudding by mixing ginger juice with whole milk? And we did a detailed investigations of different brands of olive oil from different grocery stores. And how can you tell that those olive oil are purer than they are claimed to be? And for more blog info, you can follow us at the Big Nano One at Twitter or Instagram, or you can go straight to the website. It's a materials world at wordpress.com to check out more blogs. That's it, and thanks everyone.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Sounds like you've got some very interesting work cut out for you. Next, we have our career development grants, and we're starting out with Allison Nguyen. Allison is at Chapman University in Orange, California. Her discipline is psychology, clinical psychology. Her degree and specialization, Master of Arts, Marriage and Family Therapy. Allison is pursuing a master's degree in psychology to become a marriage and family therapist. Her area of interest is health psychology with a focus on providing counseling services to cancer survivors and caregivers. Her goal is to serve clients of all backgrounds with humility and compassion to work towards narrowing the disparities that occur far too often in mental health care. So welcome to Allison.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It is difficult for me to put into words how truly grateful I am to be awarded with an AAUW Career Development Grant. I recognize the tremendous honor and responsibility to continue the work of the women who have gone before me to ensure all women find equity in education in the workplace. Most importantly, I would like to thank you, the trailblazing and tenacious women who sacrificed their energy, resources, and time so that I might have this opportunity. When I first graduated from UC Berkeley in 2008 with a degree in political science, I planned to pursue a career in law. However, in the months following graduation, something told me this was not the right path for me, so I took a job in sales while exploring potential career paths. A few years later, a friend invited me to volunteer with my church's youth group as a mentor for high school girls. There, I helped them navigate issues ranging from academic and family stress to technology addiction and suicidal ideation. Since I lacked clinical training, I connected those with complex issues to local mental health professionals. But it was there I developed an interest in pursuing a career in the field of counseling. Then at age 30, a few weeks after my husband and I celebrated our 1-year wedding anniversary, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. A cancer diagnosis at any age is shocking, but as a young adult, it seemed especially earth-shattering. But for me, this was actually the second time I heard the words, "You have cancer." About 15 years earlier, as a junior in high school, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, a cancer of the lymphatic system. I faced chemotherapy and radiation treatment with bravery and resilience. I was the good soldier who kept a smile on my face as much as possible so people wouldn't worry about me. But at age 30, my cancer diagnosis hit me much harder emotionally than it did in high school. Although I faced this second diagnosis with the same grit as before, I also experienced moments of deep sadness. I struggled to understand why my body had betrayed me twice by age 30 and whether I should bother trusting it any further. Overwhelmed by these thoughts, I sought counseling to find the clarity and peace I desperately needed. As I processed the physical and emotional impacts of both cancer treatments, I learned to celebrate my strength and reimagine a future for myself. And I discovered a career as a marriage and family therapist, which would allow me to provide the same high-quality mental health care, which changed my life, to others facing similar challenges. When I first applied for the AAUW grant last November, I was stressed out and scrambling. I was about 6 months pregnant with my first baby, 2 months into my first year of a full-time MFT graduate program, and working about 30 hours a week. My husband was working as an adjunct community college professor. Although he had a full course load, it was common for him to lose a class or two due to low enrollment at each semester. All of this, combined with recurring cancer-related medical testing and doctor visits, created significant financial pressure. At the time, I was overwhelmed with the many unknowns which lay before me. As a 2-time cancer survivor, my biggest fear was, will I have a healthy baby and a healthy delivery? Another worry, will my graduate program give me the flexibility I need to have my baby and continue my studies? And even if I have a healthy baby and continue with my graduate program, how will my husband and I afford everything? And despite these fears, I persevered. With the support of my family, friends, and doctors, I delivered a healthy baby girl nearly 3 years to the day from my bilateral mastectomy, and about 2 weeks before California's COVID shutdown in March. I learned the importance of advocating for my academic goals with polite tenacity, and I am truly grateful to Chapman University for their support and flexibility. And I continue to work about 20 hours a week while maintaining my full-time graduate course load and caring for our 7-month-old baby girl, Jerry May. Just gonna make a little appearance. Yeah, she's a pretty feisty girl. We love her. We named her after my grandmother, Jerry, who passed away a few years ago and was a woman of tremendous faith and resilience. So I'm gonna hand her back to my mama. She's helping me out today. Thanks, Mom. As I pursue a degree in marriage and family therapy, I recognize the privilege and responsibility which accompany this career. And I am aware of the tragic disparities in health outcomes, which occur far too often due to race, sexual orientation, gender identity, education level, mental illness, and socioeconomic status. With my experience mentoring teenage girls and navigating graduate school while pregnant, I will approach my career as an MFT with a relentless drive to help women of all ages and all backgrounds to heal from psychological trauma, build fulfilling relationships, find the joy within, and advocate for themselves as they pursue their educational and career goals. And because of my health challenges, I have a profound desire to serve clients with medical conditions as well as their loved ones. This AAUW Career Development Grant will directly enable me to provide much needed counseling to cancer survivors like myself. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you for your support of my career as a marriage and family therapist, and I promise I will make you proud. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you, Allison. Thank you very much. Wow. And the best to you and your daughter and your husband, your family. Thank you very, very much. Now it's my pleasure to introduce another career development grant recipient, and that is Tracy Quesada. Tracy is studying at the University of California in Berkeley, and her discipline is communications, and she's working on a degree, a master's in journalism. She's also a documentary filmmaker and journalist, and she has produced and edited documentaries that address the school to prison pipeline, immigration, and race in America. Her current documentary examines one of the most taboo issues of our time, child sexual abuse, an issue that the U.S. Centers for Disease Control has called a public health crisis. Her research investigates the fundamental systemic and structural issues that contribute to society's failure to grapple with intergenerational sexual abuse. Thank you, Tracy. Take it away.
Thank you, and thank all of you. And once again, thank you, AAUW, for the tremendous amount of support. I, like many of the other women have shared, I truly appreciate it. And because of your support, I've been able to really dive deep into my research. And in doing that, I've learned so much. So I'm just going to dive in. You know, what I learned is really there is a serious public health crisis in the United States today that dramatically increases the risk of lung cancer and heart disease. It impacts children's brain development, immune system, and people who are exposed have a 20-year difference in life expectancy. Those exposed are many times more likely to suffer from PTSD, addiction, depression, and suicidal behavior. It impacts 1 out of every 4 girls and 1 out of every 6 boys before the age of 18, and replicates itself by causing some of its victims to expose future generations. And no, I'm not talking about COVID-19 or exposure to a chemical. I am talking about child sexual abuse. And as Diane said, according to CDC, child sexual abuse is a public health crisis, a crisis that we as a society are failing to address. And you know, I could have gone the rest of my life not knowing any of this. It's overwhelming, I know. However, about 8 years ago, my 9-year-old niece disclosed to me that she had been sexually abused by her paternal grandfather, and I became her advocate for her. I became an advocate for her in the legal process. My family, like most families who experienced this, was torn apart by this revelation. And I have witnessed the terrible and ongoing impact child sexual abuse has had on my entire family. In my research to assist my niece, there we are there, I learned how little coverage there was on this issue, not to mention a glaring lack of representation of people of color who experience child sexual abuse. So I gathered up my research from assisting my niece and set out to develop a multimedia project and social impact campaign on this ignored public health crisis. And I believe it's possible because of recent trends. There's been a major national shift in norms regarding what is being openly discussed in the public sphere because of the Me Too movement. Our campaign titled When You Were Young arrives at a crucial time within this national discussion. And while the Me Too movement has made important gains, it has thus far failed to be inclusive of the experiences of women of color or to address child sexual abuse. And while there have been other films that address child sexual abuse, these stories are focused on the white community and do not feature a social impact campaign. Our documentary and impact campaign, When You Were Young, will be the first to share the story of an African-American woman coming to terms with the intergenerational cycle of child sexual abuse within her family. Now, we know and we have seen the incredible power documentaries have in invoking empathy and compassion for the people we are watching on screen. Documentaries have been known to shift people's perspectives, change policies, and galvanize social movements. Some of you might have heard about documentaries like Bully, The Invisible War, and Blackfish that brought national awareness to critical social issues. When You Were Young is modeled after these campaigns. Our film and campaign will address the stigma of child sexual abuse by employing a multi-pronged approach, a proven and successful model for films with social impact campaigns. We'll raise awareness through a grassroots campaign and build community by forming a national community of survivors through our established partnership organizations. We have partnered with people all over the country who are working with our target audience, mostly in communities of color who've been impacted by this public health crisis. We'll create a curriculum, and the educational curriculum will feature a lesson plan to facilitate the workshops and will be used in conjunction with an educational screening tour around the country. Together with our partners, we will show the film and teach the curricula in 500 universities over a 3-year campaign. Our partnership organizations will distribute the campaign and curriculum and get it out to the community. Now, I am thrilled about our team. So excited about it. Our team includes a combined 80 years of experience in documentary film, producing 37 films and launching successful impact campaigns around the world for each of those 37 films. And we recently received funding from Big Ideas at UC Berkeley, the university I'm attending, and the Berkeley Film Foundation, the prestigious, I should say, Berkeley Film Foundation. And we are in the running right now for ITBS, which is PBS, public television grant. And we're working to raise an additional $300,000 to make all of this possible, which, like I said, we believe it's possible because we have so many partners around this country who are waiting to just get this out, the curriculum and educational modules that come with the film out into their communities. And with that current funding, we'll be able to actually complete production. We're so excited about this, and develop, not complete, but develop the curriculum, which is really huge. Thank you all for your time, and thank you for the AAUW grant that made it possible for me to really take a deep dive and continue to on this very ignored, this public health crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. That's a large undertaking, and good luck with that.
Thank you.
Now we move on to community action grants. And we have one community action grant speaker today. That is, would be Frances Rosner. The recipient of the grant is AAUW Long Beach. It's a community action grant for their program, Energizing Potential. The effectiveness of the AAUW Long Beach STEM Career Conference on LBUSD middle school girls. Energizing Potential will determine the outcomes of the 2.5-hour AAUW Long Beach STEM Career Conference, which more than 2,690 Long Beach Unified School District middle school girls have attended since 2003. The expected outcomes: the taking of more STEM courses in high school and attending college. Will be able to assist with AAUW Long Beach and other organizations as they seek funding to continue their STEM projects and to improve upon their existing programs. So welcome, Frances.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Frances, the lead on a unique 7-year research project which delves into the effectiveness, as Judy has just pointed out, of an event our AAUW Long Beach branch has been conducting for 18 years. Energizing Potential is definitely a team project. If we could have the next slide, please. Thank you. With numerous branch and community members involved now and in the past. Currently, I'm fortunate to have Mary Lamo and Raquel Sanchez as my co-chairs on this project, and as the co-chairs of the STEM Career Conference going forward. There are quite a few organizations, including several AAUW branches that I know of, which offer half-day or full-day STEM experiences for girls, but there's no data about the outcomes of those events. Outcome research was conducted twice for the week-long AAUW Tech Trek program held on college campuses, the most recent in 2013, and that was entitled Igniting the Spark. Next slide, please. Let me review for you quickly what our event looks like so you can make relevant comparisons to other events with which you may be familiar. Our girls attend substantially Title I funded middle schools or K through 8 schools, which means they all qualify for free meals on campus. They are bused in after school to Long Beach City College, chaperoned by volunteer teachers or counselors at each of the 7 schools. The girls receive a snack on arrival and on departure, plus a swag bag of goodies, which are donated. They've had lip balm, water bottles, colorful socks, headphones. A young woman delivers the inspiring keynote address, speaking of the challenges she has overcome to attain the education and positions she now holds. They then proceed to 2 40-minute workshops where they participate in hands-on activities connected with that STEM career. We have 10 careers represented each year, and the girls are assigned at least one of their top 3 choices. The final event is a wrap-up with sharing, filling out of evaluation forms, and writing a thank you note to someone who inspired them at the conference. Our goal for years has been to have 250 girls attend. It's usually more in the low 200s, but all the stars aligned this year in 2020, and we actually had 261. Please note the budget of $9,900. It's highly relevant to why we are doing the research. Next slide, please. While we have anecdotal evidence that the girls enjoy the conference in the moment, this was a photo taken in the structural engineering workshop this year, and are quite inspired. You can see a thank you note that was given to AAUW. We do not have any long-term outcomes. And this is why it's so important. When we started in 2003, funding was mainly for a few stationery items. We needed name badges, we needed to have copies, and we needed snacks. We could manage for under $2,000. During the recession that began in 2008, Long Beach City College needed to start charging for use of the facility, and the model whereby after-school nonprofit programs transported the girls fell apart because they didn't have funding from their donors. We now needed to pay for buses. And around this time, a nonprofit in Long Beach that served girls closed its doors, unfortunate for them, but fortunate for us, and they donated their community funds to us, designated toward the STEM Career Conference. My career just prior to retirement was as a fundraiser, and I knew these funds weren't going to last for very long. I also understood that larger grantors expect valid data to make the case for financial support. Even being in a sweet spotlight as we are now, with companies eager to be seen as supporting girls in STEM, couldn't last forever. And I'm not even sure what's going to happen now after the COVID issue here. We needed data to support the case in the future, and the research found none for smaller events. In fact, I heard from another AAUW member just joined a branch out in the Inland Empire, and she'd been searching around too and contacted me and hadn't been able to find anything. So I know it's still not out there. And that's why energizing potential became so important. So here's our journey. Next slide, please. We met with the members of the National AAUW STEM Task Force when they had one, and other researchers. We received permission to use the Igniting the Spark research methodology. The superintendent of the Long Beach Unified School District put us in touch with the district research department. I had no idea that districts had a research department, and we submitted a lengthy application. They've been a partner with us now throughout the entire program. We created permission forms in English and Spanish, getting permission from the 8th grade girls and their parents to track their courses throughout high school, and to reconnect for a survey in their senior year. We were kind of working backwards because we didn't have contact information and had to look forward to be able to provide the survey information. The forms were filled out in 2015 and 2016 and submitted at the conference. And then throughout the next 4 years, Long Beach Unified School District provided data spreadsheets, and we provided annual reports in return. In 2018, we needed to find a data analyst. None of us are statisticians. And a meeting with a department head at Cal State University Long Beach led us to requesting more data of the school district, and they were very amenable to doing that. And the decision to hire a consulting firm that works with nonprofits to create the online survey and do the analysis. The 2015 cohort, now seniors, were surveyed in May of 2019, and the 2016 cohort in early April 2020, just as the COVID lockdown began. Once the final results are received from the National Student Clearinghouse about which girls have been accepted to attend college, the analysis will begin. Next slide, please. Just a few stats. The aggregate refers to all the 8th grade girls, because we are only working with 8th grade girls in 2015 and 2016, who attended that year. Attrition was 25% over the 5 years as girls moved out of the district. We were pleased with the survey response rate of 36%. We had been aiming for a 30% response rate of Igniting the Spark survey and surpassed it with repeated phone calls. We even had to do half of them in Spanish, target card incentives. And in 2019, we sent customized letters to the girls via their high school counselors. We will be able to compare the 1-week Tech Trek experience with our 2.5-hour event, since we paralleled the queries from their research. It will also be interesting to see what the what the pandemic has done with the applications to college this year compared to last year's applications. Slide 7, please, the next slide. We can't wait to find out what the data and responses reveal. Over the 18 years of the STEM Career Conference, hundreds of hours have been spent annually by the 40+ conference volunteers, by the Long Beach Unified School District champions and chaperones to get the girls safely there and back, plus thousands of dollars in resources. We want to show the impact on the girls and to learn how we can make limited hour STEM events even more effective. AAUW California will be posting the final report on their website by late June. AAUW Long Beach is grateful to AAUW for this grant, which makes the final analysis of the energizing potential data possible. And I thank you for your attention. That was a lot of detail shared in just a few moments. And I'm going to put in one more plug because I know I have a few more seconds. I want to put in a plug for AAUW Work Smart, which is another program that AAU Long Beach works on. It is an AAUW program. There is a webinar for AAUW Work Smart at noon on October 21st. That's a Wednesday. And you can visit our branch website for the details on how to register. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the work that you're doing on with the girls in Long Beach. I think that there's been a slight change the way I understand it. I'm not sure, are we going to Judy Horan next, or are we going to question and answers?
We're going to question and answers.
Okay.
And so Sandy will take over with that. I think Linda's going to go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you to all the excellent panelists, recipients of the AAUW fellowships and scholarships. I think at this point, we want to bring everybody back on the screen so that we can see your faces. I can ask some questions of the recipients. We do have a few questions for some of you, and I'll go ahead and start with Jamila Harris first. And she had, the question for Jamila was, did you, what percentage of the school students were Black? And of the teachers, how many were Black, or of the teachers and administrators at the school?
Thank you so much for your question. I think that, so I see two questions for me, and so if you don't mind, I can address both of them at the same time.
Right, the second one, have you included teachers?
Yes.
Explored measures regarding their perceptions of racism in your analysis?
Thank you. So a bit about the context of the school that I am currently doing my research at. It's historically a traditionally white community, and so it has a deep history of racial segregation, and Black people really only recently began to live inside of this community. And so the school district is very hyper segregated across the lines of race and class. And so the student body of this particular high school is approximately 40% Black. However, most of the teachers and school leaders are non-Black / white and Latinx. And there are less than 10% teachers who identify as Black in this high school. And then my second question, have you also included teachers, explored, measured their perceptions regarding racism? Yes. And so my final dissertation includes methods such as semi-structured interviews with teachers, the school principal, as well as other disciplinary authoritarians. And I also did ethnographic research where I actually sat in and did classroom observations of shadowing each of the 13 core students who were in the study. However, my data focused in on how students themselves conceptualize racism. But from my conversations with teachers and staff, a lot of the majority findings that came up was that a lot of teachers were internalizing deficit ideas about the lives of students based on the structural conditions of poverty that were taking place in the community.
Interesting. Thank you, Jamila. Very good. Very interesting. Our next question is for Beth Kopaz. And Beth, your research is so intensely personal, but why do you think the Korean adoption process is handled in such a non-transparent way? Did you study that at all in your
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the question. So that isn't necessarily the focus of my research, but I can definitely give an answer because it's kind of background to how I'm thinking about my project. So Korean transnational adoption has been ongoing from about the mid-1950s, following the Korean War as a war relief effort, primarily mixed race Korean children that were being adopted to countries like the United States and in Europe. And Korean adoption, transnational adoption peaked in the 1980s, which is when I was adopted. And at that time in the 80s, there were thousands and thousands of children being adopted transnationally each year. And so I think there was sort of a mismanagement of some of the paperwork and information, but at the same time, at least in the US, which is my focus, there were specific sort of like legal requirements in order for an adoption, a successful adoption placement. So even in my case, as an example, even though I later discovered these truths about my biological family that were not in my adoption paperwork, the reason why they were fabricated was in order to make sure that I would be placed successfully with the family in the US. And I think some of the thinking, at least anecdotally, I've heard from friends who have gone back to their Korean agencies to talk to the social workers that are working there. One of the responses when they question, why does this occur? Why are there these discrepancies? Her response was, we didn't expect you to come back. So I think at least, the thinking has changed now, even though adoption still exists. I think there are much more requirements for transparency and more documentation. But I think at the time, there was just this thought that we're doing this act to benefit these children. And yeah, the other side of it was not seen as important.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you very much. Our next question is for Holly Okonkwo. And Holly, can you say a bit more about your work with high schoolers in Accra?
Sure. So the work that I was doing in West Africa is generally to co-develop a curriculum that is based on local knowledge and practices. And so it draws on culturally responsive education, which it's actually the inverse of it, which tends to try to fit STEM within, tends to try to fit culture within STEM curriculum. But I sort of take the reverse to see the way STEM is embedded in local practices. So for example, a lot of the girls take culinary arts, which if any of you cook, there's a lot of chemistry involved in it. So teaching about STEM principles that are already embedded in sort of the ways that young women kind of think and see and feel themselves within the world. And then the other part of it is to develop a way of understanding STEM that is embedded with local needs. So putting young girls at the creator position of knowledge production, rather than just the recipients or consumers of it. And so it's experimental, and to kind of see what sort of emerges, when you give young girls the opportunity to dictate what is important, or what are the problems that should be solved, or what are the principles and practices that should be touted as leading for them. And so that's kind of what I do there. And so I work with high school girls, just kind of out of coincidence. And so the one in Accra is an underserved school of young girls. And it's a great opportunity to just kind of build connections with them. It also has some service learning components for the girls, where they're able to go out into the community and kind of toy with things. And then the other project that I do at the Science Academy, those are more advanced young ladies, and there we just kind of think more so of the practical approaches of leadership through STEM education.
Thanks, Holly. Thank you very much. I'm going to transition to my partner, one of my communication partners, Julika Barrett, and she's going to go ahead and ask some of the next round of questions for the rest of the presenters. Thank you very much, ladies. It was so informative.
Thank you, Linda. We have a couple of questions for speakers, and we have also a question for Heather Miller. So let me begin with our speakers, and we'll circle back to Heather. And one of the questions for Mara was, what percentage of women currently are in political positions within the Tunisian government?
Thank you for that question. I wanted to get into a little bit more details, but the two organizations in the study lobbied heavily for an electoral gender quota for women to be represented in politics and to have a place in politics. The quota, I don't want to get into the details, but it's very revolutionary actually, because there's a vertical quota and a horizontal quota, which is to maximize the number of women in politics. At the national level, we just had the vertical, and they averaged about 30% of members of parliament over the past decade. At the local level, they had a total quota, which is only found in Scandinavian states, and they made up almost 50%. There's 47% of local officials are women. This is something I'm tracking for the future projects on women in politics. We did see a decrease in the most recent election of women in politics, and I have a feeling it's because of increased political violence against women. And that's something that the secular organization in my study lobbied heavily for to include in the law against gender-based violence. So we're seeing a lot of intimidation and political violence against women in politics, and that's something I'm keeping an eye on. And it could be very dangerous for backsliding on women's rights. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is a question for energizing potential. Is there a plan to expand to a national investigation of STEM?
Not from our branch. I'm going to have to defer that to national. This has been a long process. And we were specifically looking at the size of an event and its impact on it. So I would think that a lot of this thing could be utilized no matter where you are. Although we do have a special population that we're working with on this. So it's a unique population, low socioeconomic group. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Frances.
Sure.
There's a question for Rachel. It says basically commenting that your blog is fantastic. And you know what? That question just disappeared off my screen. So if somebody has that, please repost it. That would be great. And then there's a question. I'm not sure if this was answered, Jamelia, but have you also included teachers explored or measured regarding their perceptions of racism?
Yes, I addressed that question, and the answer is yes. I included a purposive sample of teachers as well as administrators in the study.
Terrific, thank you. All right, so for Heather, will the change for IRA mandated distribution for 2020 be addressed, particularly as it's related to QCD, qualified charitable distributions?
I can answer that, and thank you for the question. Sorry for the funny transition over to back to fundraising, but this is a question about for people who have an individual retirement account, and there is a they well know that once you're age 70 and a half or older, you need to take a required minimum distribution every year. However, the CARES Act has granted everybody a reprieve from that this year. But what I like to point out is the nice thing about the IRA is you can make a qualified charitable contribution at any time, and you can then exclude that distribution from your income. And so even though you're not required to take a distribution this year, many people are choosing to make a qualified charitable distribution. And we encourage that if it's helpful to you and your finances. So AAUW accepts those all the time. And there's just one other nuance about IRA gifts. And I'll just say quickly that this is a gift to charity from your IRA in the current tax year, but there are also ways to give from your IRA that are planned giving. And so you may also contact me about that if you have any questions.
Thank you, Heather.
Thanks.
And so we're back to Judy Horan, so I'll transition to you, Judy.
Hello. I'm so glad to be here this afternoon, and as usual, I'm overjoyed and over the moon about all our fellows. I'm so proud of all of you, and it's such a wonderful feeling to every year to be able to give to an organization who really, really believes in women's advancement and education. And a special shout out to Beth Kopaz, who is studying under my endowment this year, and I'm hoping to meet her in person sometime this year. So thank you. It's a great honor to speak for and to the Legacy Circle today. I am the chair for Southern California, and I have a partner in the North, Charmin Gehring, and we work together to get people to try to join us in this wonderful group. It's interesting to see all the people today who I hope will consider not only giving to AAUW today to donate, but will consider joining us in the Legacy Circle. On a personal note, live, love, leave a legacy has been my goal for most of my life. I joined AAUW in 1973, and I was charter secretary for my branch. And from there, I went from there to the district, to the state, and to the national level, and served on 2 national boards. And I'm still hanging around in my old age and still doing AAUW work. So it is a forever thing. I knew I had found my home when I got to AAUW. In the 70s, when the Legacy Circle was started, I wanted to be a part because I thought it was a great idea, but I thought I'd never have a, quote, estate large enough to qualify. And then I was told by a very young woman who was running the program at that time that AAUW did not ask for a specific amount. You could do whatever you want. And it was very simple. You could just leave something in your will, your trust. You could do IRA. You could do all kinds of other financial things to, you know, annuities and all that kind of good stuff that I don't know a whole lot about, but I can certainly refer you to Heather Miller, who knows everything about all this for sure. But anyway, I was very, very glad to make the commitment to AAUW rather than just think of it as you know, something you leave in your will. So I did sign up, and I signed up with a small amount, which I'm really happy to say that I've been able to add to over the years. The process is so easy. There's very little paperwork. There's no minimum amount, and you have a chance to be a part of a great group of women and men. We have men in the Legacy Circle also in California, and that's very good. And you also get, I'm noticing people are wearing their Legacy Circle pins, and I will kind of stand up so you can see mine. And there's a beautiful piece of jewelry. It was designed by a mentor of mine, Alice Ann Lydell, who was president of the Educational Foundation for 8 years, and who really got me interested in that whole area. And I'm glad to say that I've worked with Diane Owens on the fund for many years, and I'm glad that she's our president this year. So anyway, this is a perfect time to say yes to Legacy Circle with all the things that are going on in our country and the fact that we want to leave this place a better place for women and girls. So Charmin, I know, is with me on this. We want you to say yes to Legacy Circle, to add you as a member. We are both in the California directory. Also, Heather Miller is available, you know, in Washington, D.C., and she can help with any questions. And our group meets once a month on Zoom, of course, which is better than the phone. So we like that anyway. So we have a great group of people from across the country who work on Legacy Circle. We'd love to have you join us. So if you have any questions, look us up. And I'm known in my circle of friends as the quote person. So I'm going to leave you with a quote, and it is from our 1999 Achievement Award winner for AAUW, who most of you know was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I quote, "Fight for the things you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you." Thank you so much for listening to me today.
Thanks, Judy. I also want to echo your wonderful words about the Legacy Circle. It's a pleasure and a privilege to work with all of you. This is the time in the program now where I would ask all of our Legacy Circle members to stand up if I could and be recognized. So everybody look at Frances and Judy's pins, and we're recognizing all of you in the Legacy Circle. One other quick note in my remarks about AAUW's mission, I meant to tell you that interwoven through all of our work, of course, is research, because AAUW is fact-based. We believe in research. And with that, I want to give a shout out to the Mooney Lecce Giving Circle, who is funding research again this year, along with policy work, and is a tremendous group of supporters. And we're so grateful for everything that the Mooney Lecce Giving Circle has done over the years. Thank you.
Okay, I believe we have a couple of more questions that Linda's going to put forth.
Oh, okay. Of course, you got to be ready just at a moment's notice to come on the screen and ask your question. So for Tracy, I know, is there a timeline for your release of your documentary?
So like with everything, we are really working on fundraising. We are looking to raise $300,000 to complete this film. It's a high production, and it's the only way you're going to get people's attention, like the ones that I listed, Bully, Invisible War. Those are really high production. So we are wrapping, before that, we will be wrapping up production by next April, May. And then the goal is to have the funds ready. So April, May, we start editing that, get into post-production and get it out. I have so many, you know, partners who are just cannot wait. And with that comes the educational modules. So we're raising funds for not just the feature, but shorter pieces that go with our educational curricula, so that it could be in the universities and with our community partners who work with survivors, who are working really on the front lines and developing new models so that we effectively address child sexual abuse.
Oh, great. Where are you going to be filming it?
The film, we've been filming, and the main protagonist, the main character is Aquila Lewis. She's a native of Oakland, California.
Oh.
And right now she's navigating moving. So another piece of that is kind of what we're seeing now. Like, she's navigating moving out of the state of California because of COVID. You know, she's an artist like me, an artist of color. We both come from below poverty level, and it's challenging, you know, to really navigate that world. And so she has just struggled financially and with homelessness, to be quite honest. And so we're following a little bit of her navigating. Are you going to stay here? You're going to go to Vegas? And so even raising the funds to follow her there.
Oh, okay.
And so the film is shot mostly here. Her mother is a secondary character as well. And her grandmother's in the film too, although her grandmother recently passed away earlier this year.
Oh. Thank you. Well, good luck. Yeah, good luck. Rachel, I did have a question for you. Sandy Kirkpatrick said your blog is fantastic and what a great way to reach out during the pandemic, but were you able to continue your research on batteries, or is that dependent on being able to get back into the lab?
So I'm already able to get back into lab, and I feel like the research part at Stanford is kind of already gone back to normal. So my research has been recontinued very quickly after the lockdown has been lifted.
Oh, okay, that's great. Okay, thanks. And Allison, I have one question for you as well. Once you finish your degree and get your certificate as a marriage and family counselor, are you planning on focusing primarily on women's health in your practice?
I definitely have a passion for serving women throughout the entire lifespan, but I think I'd like to expand it to serving, you know, men and women who are affected by health-related issues in their families. So not just women, you know, a little bit broader, I think would be more married.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. That was our last question for the panelists, and I'd like to turn it back over to Sandy. Are you available, or is it going to be Diane to take us out?
I don't think Sandy's coming up, so thank you all for being here today. I think Diane has some information about the upcoming webinars that she
Right, right. So I'm kind of taking over here for Sandy Gabe, who has prepared all of this and done such a fantastic job. And I also want to thank all of the panelists, all of the speakers for being here today. It was absolutely fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I think I got more, you know, none of us like this COVID thing, but I think this worked out well, don't you? I really do think it worked. So upcoming webinars, of course we have more webinars, and actually Monday night is the next webinar, and this is being presented by two women from Philadelphia. And it's about increasing the gender diversity on the boards of nonprofit organizations. I'm going to be involved with this webinar also. And I really encourage everyone that's listening to come and hear this, because we need to get more women on boards, not, educational boards, medical boards, any kind of boards. We need to get more women. So please come and find out how to do that and how you can be successful at doing that. So that will be Monday night, October 12th at 4 p.m. And we're having this one at 4 p.m. because we don't want to keep them up until midnight. So, so the people on the East Coast are going to be doing this, and we want to work with their schedule. Then on October 24th, the AUW Fun Luncheon, our second one, will be here. And we invite all of our panelists today to come back and hear the people that you met in our practice, come back and hear them on the 24th. That will be at 1 p.m. And then Why Public Policy Matters is our last one for October. But we'll be back in November, so just wait. But on October 28th at 7 p.m., Why Public Policy Matters will be delivered by our Public Policy Chair, Kathy Harper, and some of her members that are on the Public Policy Committee. And they're doing a great job getting the vote out, getting people to remember to vote. And I hope all of you remember to vote too. So thank you very, very much. And good luck to all of you, and you'll be hearing from us. So thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Bye.